There we
Great.
go, and we're live. So, welcome everyone. This is our second episode in a three-series podcast that we are recording based on conversations we started having about international scaling for European founders, and particularly those who are trying to launch in the US. And today we're talking to Rutger Sneep, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Fairphone. And we recently had the privilege of partnering together on a search. And today we're going to break down what that search actually looked like. And so when you kick off a search in the US, different principles apply than they might in Europe. And the way that a search is run tends to send signals to the US market about what you believe as a company and what your culture looks like, which may send candidates running or may get them really excited to join you. So Rutger, let's dive right in. So
Yep.
first off, we're curious, right? There must have been this moment where you considered, hey, do we need this role? So was there a time where you thought about either not opening it at all or opening a different type of role, running it from Europe? What was your thought process in ultimately deciding to kick off?
Yeah. Yeah. All of the above. We thought about not doing it at all in the beginning because we thought we were going to do it from Europe and then hiring maybe not so much a general manager, but more individual contributors that are more on the marketing side or sales side or technical account management, for instance. But in the end, the main reason for us is you need a face in the US, and the country itself is mega, it's big, and in Europe we are in 26 countries. So that means that we are already dividing our time within Europe on all the different countries, and then also doing that in the US, including the different time zones, makes it not easier. So for us, in the end, was the main reason. And then if I look at my own agenda, I I'm in the US a lot, but it's impossible to be there on the time that's always necessary. So in the end, you need someone who is there on a daily basis, can go to the customers, can be the face on a fair or have a meeting with someone who is not in the same time zone, and it can be digital. That can be, of course, live, but it's in the end what that was for us the main reason to really search for a general manager in the US.
Yeah. And when we first started talking, I remember we discussed opening a sales role. This is a conversation we have quite a lot.
Yeah.
And at some point it clicked that we needed someone who could wear multiple hats and who could take on a broader remit.
Yeah.
What was that moment for you?
I think that Ellie, our director of people and culture, really pushed it on me and saying, "Hey, listen, if you need someone and who can lead the organization, and you can also contribute to more than only doing the, let's say, sales part, that would absolutely help." And yeah, in the end, I gave in and said, "Yeah, I fully understand what you mean." And then when the search started, everything fell together, and then it was logical for us. So in the end, I was very happy that we had that conversation, and it took a little bit of time to digest. Not so much in why we want to have a GM, but more on what does it mean to have a GM versus a sales manager, for instance, in the US.
Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I'm curious for other people that might be listening and might be considering these different role types. What for you is the main differentiator between those two roles?
Yeah, if you are going to the US and you want to build a business here, and for us, we are in the business to consumer. So in the end, we have consumers who we want them to buy our product, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can interact with our consumers. Because if you are in a B2B company that sells to other businesses, that means that you can have a direct conversation with that customers. We can't. We always have to do that via marketing. We have to do it via partners. And we can't do it individually with our end consumers. So that also means that that role is quite broad by itself. And if you are doing this part and you have to be experienced in and marketing and sales and logistics and supply chain and regulatory questions, yeah, that's impossible to handle that all from one part of the organization. And of course, we have our headquarters in Amsterdam, where all those different areas are based. But still, you need someone on the ground that can make decisions that are needed to get into the pace of the organization that we are building in the US. So yeah, in the end, just doing something on one area is not enough.
Yeah.
And it also was in general, we made a decision not to go for only one person per se, but to start building a team earlier than we anticipated in let's say half a year or a year ago. that also made it, of course, a little more logical to have a general manager, because that can also oversee more areas.
Yeah. And from Fairphone's perspective, what was that key moment that you needed that GM in place, and why then?
We decided last year to launch our audio products.
Mm-hmm.
And you do it a little bit entrepreneurial. You start and you don't know always what is on your path and what's coming, which is good, because it also means that you're not hampered by any problems that might occur. But then you see, okay, what's happening and what's the full blown of it. And this year we are going for a full blown launch with all our products. That means that we have on the legal side a lot more to manage, on the risk side a lot more to manage, in other areas. And if you look at what the organization was needing at that moment, there was much more needed on people that have a feeling with the US market, that in the end you have someone here with this perspective, and also this way of thinking about how branding works, how marketing works, how legal works, and all those kind of things that happen in that area for us. And I think that was in the end somewhere around Christmas. I think I don't have a real moment, but it's somewhere around Christmas holidays that
You were having your dinner and you're thinking, okay, this is it.
Yeah, stepping back a bit, and then okay, this is something that we need to start doing.
Yeah.
And then we did an outreach to you. We were in conversation, of course, already, but then it really started to go.
Wonderful. And so talk to us a little bit about how the process began, right? So you met with Maren and the Key Search team. How did that process look for you? I know we see a lot of times with founders and executives, they want like this full funnel. They want to see 100+ candidates. They don't want to miss anything. So talk to us about that process, how you chose to work with us, and what that looked like. Did you really miss out on candidates? Was there something like there was missing? How did that work as you kind of went through that process?
I think we started the conversation with Key Search and Maren roughly a year ago for us, when we were part of the Scale NL program from the Dutch government, and then we went to the US, had conversations, and there was also the conversation with Maren and the possibilities. And then we had a conversation, I think, I'm not sure, but somewhere in Q3, around what you can provide as a company. And what for us really helped was the data-driven approach. And there also, of course, if we have our own HR team or recruitment team doing the recruitment, and we put a new possibility on the market that we are searching for an account manager, or we're searching for someone, a legal representative or something, then we have 100+ people that come in, and then you have to go through all those resumes, and then at least 70% is just not valid, and you can't do anything with that. So you have 30 people left, and then you need to make a decision. Okay, which 30 are logical in the pipeline? Which do we want to go to a, let's say, long list, short list, and then have conversation with? That's quite a long process, and it's also a process that takes a lot of time from the people that are part of the hiring team, and also gives a lot of conversation internally. And if you have to go to all those candidates and you have 100+, and last time I had a marketeer, and I think we had 163 applicants in 10 days. So yeah, we closed that vacancy because it's just too much to handle. We can't do that from our own. So there, for us, that really helped that we don't have to do that part. So the data-driven and how it's being presented to you really helped in us making decision. We've also worked with other executive agencies on hiring processes, and this was really what stood out for us in why Key Search was for us the right one to go for. And that's of course only on a demo, because you don't know if that's actually going to work throughout the process as well. But it did, luckily. But I also give back to Maren on the end of the process that I did have a little bit of the FOMO, because in the end we only received, I think 5 candidates in total that we really not so much spoke about, but we really went to the real interview part. That was also a little bit scary, because you have 330 million people in the US, and if you only have 5 applicants that you're going into the interview process, is this really the best fit? But after the first round of interviews, we all said to each other we were with 3 with the hiring team, and we have the right fit with at least 3 of the candidates that we went to with the final round or the second round, and that was perfect fit for all 3 candidates. So we at that moment the FOMO was also gone, and it was very logical. And it, of course,
Yes.
helps.
And what advice would you give other executives, hiring teams, founders that are also feeling that FOMO? Again, like you said, there's millions of people here in the US. How do you kind of bypass that? What were your thoughts during the process that, kind of made you think, hey, we've got this?
Yeah, I think that if you start this process and you have a clear pathway. Okay, these are the things that we want to see. These are the cultural aspects that we want as a company. These are the hard skills that we want. These are the competences, etc. If you have that clear, and you can then trust on the partner that you're working with, which is of course hard in the first time. So it will always be easier when you do it the second or the third time. But the first time you can trust on the fact that they are delivering on what they are delivering on, and have maybe a reference call with some other people that have done it earlier with them. That helps, of course. But for me, what the moment it clicked and the moment it was, if you look at the candidates, if you look at their profiles, okay, this is really what we're going to. And we had a weekly call, and in that weekly call, we discussed, listen, these are the candidates we saw. These are on the more of the long list. These are more of the short list. These are the ones that we think that are a perfect fit. And that was a moment that we got, okay, they understand what we need. They think about what the candidate needs from our side. Yeah. So that helped. So I think that for us, I think it's if you are starting the search, thinking about, okay, how much time do you want to have for yourself? Do you want to talk about 100 candidates, or do you want to talk about the 5 candidates that really make the difference for you as a company? That's in the end the biggest advice, I would say.
Yeah. And that goes back a bit to speed as well, because I remember we started talking and you said, look, we need someone by July. And I think at that point it was February. And then we know that typically an executive hiring process will take, give or take, 3 months at least, right? From starting to talk to people, or kicking off the role even, and starting to talk about the profiles, and starting to talk to people, to closing the offer. And luckily in the US, people can start quickly. So that gave us a little bit of breathing room. But we pressed on speed quite a bit during the process, and that can, sometimes feel uncomfortable too. I know for clients, when we go in, we say, look, we've got 12 weeks. That means that in week 3, we need to have people we're going to be discussing. We want to have our shortlist by week 4 or 5, and we need to run the process within these weeks, that we've designated to it. In Europe, things tend to go how they go a little more in my experience, right? So they just evolve. Maybe someone goes on vacation, is not available to interview, and there's a little bit of a delay. Things like that are quite normal. Whereas in the US, speed is of the essence. And, if you don't keep moving on the process, you will lose candidates' interest and engagement. Was there any point for you in hiring for this role where you thought, okay, the speed is actually creating a little bit of friction? And how did you work through that?
I think not so much friction, but it's more, can I make myself available on a weekly basis for this specific hire? That's more the question. And that's not so much maybe from my side, but we were with 3 people that were doing the hiring process. So I'm the hiring manager, so I was involved. Our CEO was involved, and our director of people and culture was involved. So it was quite a small team, so 3 people that helped. But if you have a bigger team and you want to have a broader management team that looks on this role, then it makes it even harder to go that agendas aligned. And we all know how it works. And when you set out 12 weeks and you say, okay, we're going to make a week meet on a weekly basis, that's easy when you plan that ahead for 12 weeks. But then the reality hits and something happens during the day, and you have, instead of an hour available for preparation, you have 5 minutes available for preparation. Yeah. And then you need to follow through. So that was also sometimes during our process. I think that sometimes we had 1 or 2 people, they need to decline the meeting on a weekly basis because they just couldn't be there. And that's also part of reality. That's something that we need to you need to work with. So it was, I think, not so much friction, but more on making sure that we have the time set. And once you have it in the agendas, that helps. For 12 weeks, but that's for 12 weeks in a row, or I think for 16 weeks or something in a row, we had it in the agendas. Everybody knew what was expected from them. And then even if a holiday happens, it happens, and then you can still move along with the process. What is generally, I think, important, not only for hiring in the US, but also in Europe, is for the candidate experience to be clear on what timelines are possible. And if it's not possible to meet 3 months and it's going to be 4 or 5 months, also be clear on that one.
Yeah.
Because for both candidates as well as company, that's makes it a lot easier to understand, okay, what's kind of process. What I do find that was a different way than I had in the past on approaches is that we started the interview process with the first candidates before we had the final shortlist, because you were still searching that. That meant that there is a little bit of pressure for the first candidates that you speak to make a decision on, do we go further with them, yes or no?
Yeah.
Because you don't know yet what's coming. And there,
Right.
the fear of the fear of missing out maybe is the biggest for at least for me, that okay, I have spoken with this candidate who was really good, but I'm not sure which are coming still on the short list.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to make a decision.
Yeah.
You've got that
That-
FOMO. The FOMO's back. And I think that's
exactly.
a really important point, though, that you make about the speed and having that small interview team, right? You're all aligned internally. And I think that is most important. I know we talked about this in our previous discussion, that having that alignment ahead of time helps that process move forward. If you don't have the alignment, you will not have the speed. And yes, we always do feel bad for those great candidates that are first, but those are the benchmarks, right? So it's our job, right, to make sure that we're keeping them engaged and kind of keeping them warm, as you would say. But also, yeah, you're gonna fall into that FOMO at some point.
Correct. And I think that's overall, if you look at not only the data driveness from our side that we can look at, but also from the candidate side, that also helps because they are prepped well for the interview as well. So that means that during the interview, you can that just makes it easier to have the conversation with everybody to understand. Okay, this is a fit on these items. There might be a questionnaire here. We need to go into that a little bit more in the second interview, for instance. That helps.
Yeah. And you're right. We moved pretty quickly, rigorously. We had a cadence. And so we got to that short list. And then we got to the offer stage. And that was the moment where we realized, right, that a couple of questions should have ideally already been answered that weren't answered yet. What were those topics? And particularly if you're thinking about other execs or founders that are thinking about starting to hire in the US, what are the items that they should really get clarity on prior to kicking off, from your experience?
You have the compensation package, which is quite easy to put in place if you know, okay, this is roughly what we want to pay, and etc. But there's quite a long list of things that is different in the US versus what we're used to in the Europe. And we work with an employee of record because we of course have an LTD in the US, but we don't hire people from our own organization at this moment. So as an employee of record, we are not doing everything ourselves. We also have to go to them with some questions, and especially on the health insurance and the 401k and those kind of things, which makes it a little bit more technical and also not the most interesting part to talk about from a hiring perspective, in all honesty, but very important for the candidate. That are the things that took way more time than we anticipated. We lost really, I think, weeks there. And in hindsight, I would say I would do that differently next time, because this is something that we could have done differently. And I know that you pointed it out, Maren, but I was also leading here on the internal team that are partially US citizens that know this part. But what we didn't expect is that it took quite a lot of time with us and our EOR to get to the details of the questions, because there were quite a lot of questions from the candidates. And that's good, because then it's also clear on what you're giving as a compensation package. But it makes it also on the technical elements. I don't feel comfortable about the 401k or the health insurance, or in this case there are the shares that you're talking about, etc. How does it actually work in tax regulations, or how does it actually work when you are located in New York versus Kansas versus Illinois? I don't know. So there's different those areas. And of course, in Europe, we know that the German law is different than the French law and the UK law and the Dutch law. But in the US, it's the same. But then it's just one country, but 50 states. So it also makes it sometimes a little bit complicated. And also the candidates take something with them from their background, because they have experiences, or they have already health insurance from their own organization that they've worked for, or that they had their own organization. So it also makes it differently. So I would, and in if I look back in that part, I think we lost roughly 3 weeks, more or less, on those questions and the part. And lost is maybe a big word, because in the end, it all went well and everybody was happy. But it took us more time than anticipated, and
Yeah.
that's also time from a hiring perspective. That's not my strong suit. I don't really particularly like that part. Not so much negotiation. I don't mind that part, but it's more, this is the technicalities.
Yeah.
I don't care. If I have the right candidate, I just want to move forward with it.
Yeah, that was definitely a learning from our side too, because we talked about it briefly at the kickoff, point of the process, but we didn't really double click on it or expand on it or get specific. And that's something we will need to do moving forward as well with European companies that are first hiring in the US. I'm curious about one particular topic, and we talked about this, in last 2 weeks ago, we had another skill NL cohort. We talked about this again there. So what made you decide to go with an EOR in this case versus having an entity? That's a question that comes up quite regularly.
Yeah, we do have an entity, but if you are hiring people in that entity, but you don't have that much revenue yet, it becomes quite hard. So that was for us the main reason that on the financial side of things, we are building the organization here, and we have to invest quite a lot of money to really get things going in the US. That means that there's a lot of money going out, and we of course have a construction that we have the Dutch BV, and then we have the US LTD underneath that as a separate entity. But we want to make sure that everything that goes from that part of the organization will be in the end on that P&L. And that can't be handled if you don't have revenue yet. So, and our what I mentioned last year, we started with our audio portfolio, but that's quite a small part of our revenue, especially in the US. So we first want to build that before we go into. That's the reason that we want to for an employee of record, and we are quite used to that because we, as mentioned, we work in 26 countries in Europe, and we only have our headquarters in Amsterdam. So a lot of people work in Amsterdam from the headquarters, but people that are outside of Amsterdam and work in France or in Italy or in Germany, they all work via an employee of record. So for us, it's quite a common way of doing this kind of business with our employee of record in this case. So it was for us quite easy to set it up. I think if we have the revenue going and we have our second or third hire in the US, we probably move over without an employee of record and just going into the regular way of doing it and then hiring the people from that area. It probably I think the tipping point will be 3 to 5 candidates. If you have them in the company, that will be cheaper to get them in the internal company than that doing via employee of record. And that's also something that you think about. What are the costs, and is it beneficial for us? Yes or no?
Yeah. So looking back to that offer process, was there any point where you thought, okay, this is going to go south, we're going to lose the candidate, or this is not going to materialize?
No, I think we, in the talks with, and what was maybe a good one to highlight before, we made a very conscious decision to do the second round of interviews in the US. We've been to New York and asked all the candidates to come to there and to have that conversation with them face to face. So you already build some rapport with the candidates, which is easier than doing it via only the computer screens. And that helped during that process on getting the benefits and the compensation package, etc., clear. Helped also in understanding, okay, this is how a person maybe not so much negotiates, but more is how that the person interacts with you. So that helped, I think, a lot during that process. So I didn't have really a feeling that it's going to go south. I did have a moment in time that I thought, okay, if we're not solving it now, it might take more than I hoped for. And that meant that you have your moment that you wanted to start with this candidate, and also that you need to start because you have some things going on already in the US, that you need people to be there. That was what my concern was. Are we able to still meet the target date? In the end, we did, but that was more my concern than that it would go south.
Yeah, I remember you and Ellie, the director of people and culture, were in New York for, was it 20 hours? I think it was 24 hours. And you did so very last minute. And by the way, I do want to point out too that sends a great signal to the candidates, right? It shows you their, or it shows them your commitments, to this hire, but also to being present with them. I think this is a topic we're going to talk about next time, which is how do you onboard properly, right? And how do you keep the connection between a European headquarter and the first US hire? And this is where it starts, where you demonstrate that, hey, we're here with you. we're walking the talk with you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
It leaves out that isolation, I think, as well, right? It's a really important hire, and you being there present for that interview process, I think, is super helpful and shows the candidate that you care and you're really interested. I guess like as we go forward, right, there's a lot of founders listening, executives listening, considering, hey, we want to hire in the US, but they're not sure that they can. So if you take away kind of Fairphone and what you guys are doing, what would be that like underlying signal to tell any founder that like at any stage that you're actually ready to open your first US hire, versus like just feeling the pressure to have someone there?
Yeah, I think what it all comes, for us at least, what it came down to was the moment that you really start building the business is also the moment that the questions start coming. And what I see more in US than I see in Europe is that US people want to do business with US people, or at least US based people. So if you're not here and you're not willing to move over, which is super logical if you have a big business with, in our case, almost 200 people in the Netherlands, it's also logical that you don't want to move the organization from A to B, or a part of the organization, or one person. So that means that you have to do something else. And for us, that meant if we want to be here and we want to be on top of things and we want to make sure that we can really get things going here, then you need to have someone here with presence in the United States itself. But it always is tied to the P&L, if it's also feasible, yes or no. And if that's the case, and we thought it would amplify the effect and to be here. So therefore we said, okay, we want to have someone here. And I think that for most founders also, but the people that I've spoken with during the Scale NL program myself, that are also based in the Netherlands or somewhere else, that have some people here already, that mostly is salespeople starting, just building the business, and then from there off building it from there. And that can be, for them, can be very, very important and helpful. For us, it was a different approach and a different way of starting with the GM and then building the team with that person here on the ground.
Great.
Yeah, great. Well, we're reaching the end of the conversation already. That went quickly. Any final thoughts you want to share?
Well, what I think is important to understand in general, but it's mainly in the US, things are moving faster here. And speed is high and velocity is high, and also the decision making is fast. And for us, that also meant that if you have someone with decision making power here in the US, that also means that you can build your business on that. And that is, in the end, something that you have to think about. Every business has to think about it from themselves. But for us, it meant that it really helps if you have someone here on the spot that can say, okay, we're going left or right. We know what our branding strategy is, and this is how we're going to do it in the US, without waiting on the timeline, 9-hour time difference on the West Coast or 6 hours on the East Coast, to have that conversation going in a couple of hours, but just on the spot making decision. And on a PR related matter, if there's something happening which is impossible to handle because it's nighttime during office hours, nighttime during European hours, that you still have someone here that can call the shots. That's an important one, especially if you are in the consumer electronics business in our case.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thanks for sharing your thoughts so openly. It was truly a pleasure partnering with you on this search, and I'm very glad that we managed to succeed together. And we haven't talked much about Fairphone's products, but I would be remiss not to point out that the products are awesome. So if you don't yet own a Fairphone or the audio products of Fairphone, definitely go check them out on fairphone.com. You're launching your new Fairphone soon, which I'm sure everyone's very excited about. And it's definitely proof that, focusing on sustainability doesn't have to mean that you compromise on quality. So beautiful products, go check them out. And thanks again, Rutger. And looking forward to keeping in touch.
Yes,
absolutely.
Thanks, Rutger. Looking forward to partnering again.
Cool. Thanks. It was a pleasure working with you all.